Kimmer here. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about basic if statements in C programming. We'll include some relational operators as well because it's hard to have an if statement without those. So let's continue. Relational operators. So what are relational operators? I'm sure you probably already know, but it has a fancy name, basically something that tests a relationship. So we have the greater than or greater than or equal to, less than or less than or equal to, and not equal. A couple things that I want to point out on these. You'll notice with the greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal, equal to, there's no space in between the two symbols. Additionally, a real common mistake students make is that they use a single equals, which remember is an assignment operator. So in order to say equal to, just think two equal signs. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Boolean values. So Boolean is just a fancy way of saying true or false. So true has a value of 1, false has a value of 0. Now let's take a look at an actual if statement. We take a look at this if statement. You'll notice a couple of things. It has a Boolean expression. In other words, it uses a relational operator to test a relationship between two things and determine if it's true or false. Now, you'll notice that that Boolean expression, it sits inside of parentheses. So you're basically reading it like this. If age is greater than or equal to 18, print adult. Now you'll notice the print adult does that if the expression is true, or if the expression has what we call a non-zero value. So let's go back and think about that for just a second. If the Boolean expression is true, don't forget, that's a value of 1. So if I were 22, then that would be a true statement, or in other words, it would read a 1. So if 1, meaning if true, then it's going to print F adult. However, what if I'm not? What if I'm 16? Then we can do what we call an else statement. So an else statement you can add to do something if the expression that you were testing is false or has a 0 value. So that would be what we would do on here. So if we were to put this into a program and we were to ask a person's age, then we can do an if statement like this that says, if age is greater than or equal to 18, print adult. Otherwise, print child. So let's see what it looks like in a program. So here's a C program to introduce an if statement. So if I just declare a variable int age and I ask the user for their age, I'm assuming they're going to say integer because unless you're 12 and a half, you usually don't want to have a half for your age. So we're just going to assume integers right now. Enter your age. And then there's the if statement. So based on the person's age, it's either going to print adult or print child. Okay. In case you're aware of functions, you can put if statements inside of functions. Now, if you don't know what a function is yet, then don't worry about this particular slide. We'll continue on. Now let's expand this if statement just a tad. You will notice that not only am I printing adult, but I'm also using a shortcut operator to add 1 to my adult counter or add 1 to my child counter. A couple things to note though. Curly braces. If you are doing more than one thing, you have to put a complete set of curly braces on the if and a complete set of curly braces on the else if you're doing more than one thing. So in this case, I'm doing two things. I'm printing adult and I'm adding 1 to an adult counter. Or I'm printing child and adding 1 to a child counter. Notice that it has to be an open and a close, followed by then an open and a close. All too often, students only put one set, and we'll talk about the problems with that in just a minute. So this would be known as a true block or a false block. A true block is done then. All those statements are done if age is greater than or equal to 18, if that's true. If it's not true, then it jumps down to the else, and it does everything inside the else block. So when you put things inside of curly braces, you're creating what's called a block. Now let's take a look at this one. It's still our if age is greater than or equal to 18. However, this time I'm printing something different, and I'm doing something else. So let's take a close look at it. Notice that I have the first block. Okay, if age is greater than or 18. So let's say the age is 22. If age is greater than or 18, so that's true, so it's going to go ahead and do the true block, right? But then inside of there's an inner if statement that has its own true block. So it'll print you may enter, but then it's going to check their age to see if they're greater than or equal to 21 and determine whether or not they can drink. Now, you'll notice these curly braces. A common mistake that I had talked about is that students will remove these. So if we do, let's just take a look at what we see. We only see an if statement with one block. So the entire thing then becomes the true block. So let's just say that they are, 22. If age is greater than or equal to 18, then it says you may enter. If age is greater than or equal to 21, and you may drink. But what if they're 20? Let's try the scenario again. If age is greater than or equal to 18, which 20 is, it says you may enter. But because it sees this if statement, if age is greater than or equal to 21, notice that this else belongs to that if statement as far as the computer is concerned. So basically it'll tell them you may enter, and then it'll tell them to go home. So be very careful about open, close curly braces and where they need to be. The other thing I want you to be careful about is making sure you're lining things up. It really does help. Okay, let's take a look at a different scenario. So we're going to have an integer grade. We're going to ask for a test score, and it's going to pull in the grade, and then it's going to print your grade is. And it's going to use an if statement to determine whether or not it prints an A, a B, a C, or a D, or an E, depending. If grade is greater than or equal to 90, it'll print an A. Else if. Now, one of the things I want you to notice on this else if, is there's a space in between the word else and if. So this is called an if-else chain. And this allows you then to at least find one of those true blocks. If for some reason it doesn't find one of those true blocks, well, frankly, then it comes down to the E, and you get the E. So this is just Kimmer here with your little intro on if statements. Please go ahead and find the other one that talks more about if statements soon.